This session is looking at new student induction, talking about all the work that course teams have done over the past 12 months, the progress that's been made set in the context of the Ofsted inspection, and then describing the key elements that we would say for any course team should be included in the induction in 2014. And that's being shared at the beginning of the summer planning period. So that's the session this morning. It's about course induction, discussing the different elements, and opportunity for clarification and questions. When we looked at induction 12 months ago, we realised with the new inspection cycle just how much emphasis was placed on effective induction. And the sector's clearly come a very long way from a situation where induction was seen as just about retaining students and helping them to settle into college. The emphasis, we thought when we discussed it last year, is clearly now academic. It's about helping students to understand what they can aspire to, both in terms of quality of work and in terms of what they might expect to get grade-wise from their GCSEs, and also helping them to understand how learning is different in a sixth form setting and how the subjects themselves are often different, often a great deal broader. There's some superb videos that are available still on the Excellence Gateway, which is just sharing the practice that exists in other colleges in relation to induction, but clearly we've got highly effective practice across the college now too, on which we can develop and draw. Since that time, of course, when we had the training last year, we've had our own inspection. And following that, students gave us feedback at the self-assessment conference in the spring about how they felt our induction had gone this year. It was very clear that they felt that induction had been consistent in the different courses that they had taken. So all of the key elements that we discussed in the summer training last year had been put into place. They did say they found the initial assessment helpful, that the information given out about courses was clear, the activities were motivational and challenging, clearly linked to the guidance that they'd been given in the LRC when they'd spoken to members of the course team at the enrolment. And students placed a lot of emphasis on how important that guidance was. And in relation to summer work, yes, they did say that they found it helpful. What they suggested was that the summer work that we set could be refined on the basis of student feedback this year. And we've had our own inspection feedback since then. Sure, you've seen the press releases that have accompanied that and the fantastic success stories that have gone with the way that the college has progressed this year. May well be helpful when sitting down in a team just to look back at the key aspects of the inspection report that focus on teaching and learning within particular teams. There are some fantastic messages about what is working well in terms of teaching and learning, the effective planning of activities, development of cross-college skills, and routinely developing students' understanding of specialist vocabulary and subject terminology. So some excellent messages there about induction. 12 months ago, we said these were what we wanted the key messages to be for our induction. And this was the basis on which teams planned last year. The pre-work, the initial assessment, including challenge for the ability range, and the learning conversations, plus the emphasis on independent study. Now, we asked the inspection team at the end of the inspection, what would we need to do to become an outstanding college? And the messages for those staff that attended the presentation were very clear. And they weren't about doing additional things, they were just about changing some of our mechanisms of working with students. The word culture was used, the need for a culture in which all staff have the highest aspirations for all students, and really promoting that from the beginning of courses. So those are adjustments to our current way of working. They're not completely different things, but they do involve refinements to the way that courses are planned. So what are the key elements for our induction this year? Well, first of all, we're continuing with the setting of pre-work, preparation for long road, or preparation for study, we've called it. And this is work that students will carry out over the summer to enable them to become familiar with the courses, so that when they join us, they're better placed to make effective choices at enrolment, and we're also better placed to guide them. And the work clearly has to help them to bridge the gap. And it can be about developing an understanding of the course, or in some cases, with the practice that course teams have developed, it's about developing broader understanding of the nature of the subject area and just how different that is from studying pre-16. A word or two about target minimum grades, because we do introduce those at induction, but the feedback both from staff and students and inspectors has been very clear that the target grades themselves are not sufficiently challenging. We will be introducing chances graphs this year for individual students to see not so much what their target grade is, but what their percentage chance would be or probability of achieving grades within their different courses. So they can see, with making some adjustments, that they can aspire to move beyond their target grade. And here's an example of a chances graph for a particular student. This is a student studying first year courses, but the chances graph shows how they would achieve for A2. So it's showing them the picture at the end of their courses. The other thing we are saying this year is that following those discussions, course teams can revise upwards the target minimum grades for students to make sure we capture their enthusiasm and energy when they come in. Because staff have said very clearly that they think it's important to make them more varied and more aspirational in the case of individual students. In terms of the induction activities, well, there's some fantastic examples shared at the training last year of activities that are genuinely engaging, that help students quickly to become familiar with the skills that they require. Now, students have said to us that the formative feedback that they get through induction is really important. It's important that they're introduced to the skills, but also having the TMG, it's also important that they can relate their progress to that target grade and understand what they need to do to meet or exceed the target grade expectations. So if there's one thing that we need to tweak to make sure that we can be successful this year and move towards outstanding status, in our view it would be adjusting those activities both at induction and afterwards to make sure that students are clearly relating their progress to the TMG. The last slide gives some background then about initial assessment specifically. An initial assessment is the term that we use for all of the assessment activities that students carry out with staff at the beginning of their courses. There is a college grid on which the students can record the results of their initial assessment, but the key aspect of it is the follow-up, that there's action planning about how students meet or exceed their target grade, and also that there's follow-up in terms of support for students to achieve that. Where appropriate, students can be referred for workshop or course team support. Also, students can be referred to academic support where appropriate in relation to a particular underpinning learning need. Finally, the liaison with progress coaches where appropriate, so that effective follow-up can be taken after the initial assessment. Thank you.